Okay, so we're beginning our very first unit. Our first unit is our number sense unit. So we're going to be talking about different operations for rational numbers, and right now our focus is going to be on integer operations. So we're talking about integers and the absolute value of integers. Our learning target is always going to be posted at the top of the notes. So whenever you're wondering what it is that we're going to be covering or what you're responsible for that day, it's always at the top of your notes as well as in Google Classroom. So our learning target for the day, I can connect vocabulary to integers. I can identify order and absolute value of integers. So our main topic today is integers. So with integers, when we discuss integers, that is the set of numbers that are all negatives, positives, and zero. So any positive number that you have, we call those natural numbers. When you include the value 0, it becomes whole numbers. And when you include the negatives or the opposites, that's when the whole entire thing is called integer. So integer is not just a negative number. Every zero value, every positive value is also considered an integer as well. But the negatives is what helps to expand that set. So here's an example of a set of negative and positive numbers to create our integer set. And then here's what it looks like if we had a number line graphing that material. Anything that is to the left of 0 on a number line is going to be our negative numbers. Anything graphed to the right of 0 is going to be our positive numbers. And then, of course, 0 is right in the center of our number line. And notice that 0 is not considered to be a positive number or a negative number. Okay, it's a very neutral number. Now, when we talk about integers, integers have 0 pair sets inside of them. So when we talk about 0 pairs, what we're talking about is how we can add two numbers together, and when we add them, it will equal 0. So let's say I take the number 5. 5 is a positive number. I'm going to add something to it so that I can get 0. What number up here do you think we have to add to 5 in order to get to 0? What do you think? Negative 5. Okay, so if we add a negative 5 to a positive 5, that's going to give us 0. That's because these are called 0 pairs. If we take a look, 5 is how many spots away from 0? If I start at 0 and I count to 5, how many jumps is it going to take? If I start at 0 and I count to 5, how many jumps is it going to take me to get there? 5. 5, right? We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps to get to the 5. Same thing if we start at 0 and go to negative 5. We're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps to get to negative 5. They are an equal distance away from 0. The fact that they have an equal distance or an equal absolute value creates them to being a 0 pair. When you combine them together, they will equal 0. Give me another example of two numbers up here on this number line that could be 0 pair. Give me two numbers up here that could be considered a 0 pair. 3 and negative 3. Good. 3 and negative 3 would also be 0 pairs. 8 and negative 8. Those are 0 pairs. So if you want to write that stuff down, that's perfectly fine. So we got the example 3 and negative 3. Those are going to equal 0. When you add them together, if you add those together, that'll equal 0. If we did 8 plus negative 8, that's going to equal 0. Those are all considered to be listings of 0 pairs. Okay. Now, when we are identifying how to order or how to compare numbers. We know how to compare two positive numbers. I know that 5 is smaller or lesser than 20. I also know how to compare a negative number to a positive number. I know negative numbers are smaller than positive numbers. What gets confusing is when we're comparing two negative values. So when you're comparing negative values, the larger the base number, the smaller the negative value. The larger the base number is, the further away from 0 it's going to be. So taking a look here, I'm going to zoom in for a moment into our number line. If I look at -2 and -8, -2 and -8. -2 has a smaller base number, doesn't it? 2 is smaller than 8. But which one is closer to 0? -2 or -8? Which one's closer to 0? -2. So that makes -2 bigger than -8, right? It's closer to the 0 than -8 is. So when we have a larger base, it makes the value smaller. Okay, makes it further away from our 0. So when we're putting them in order from least to greatest, -8 is lesser than -2. So let's take a look here at that. We have -17 compared to -12. Which one of these numbers is going to be further away from 0? It's going to be further down the number line from 0. The -17 or the -12? -17. You guys can shout it out. It's perfectly fine. I do not mind. I'm not a person who goes, oh, let me call on whoever raises their hand. Shout it out, okay? Now, if I say, raise your hand and tell me, then that's when I'm asking you to raise your hand. But for me, I'm a give me the answer kind of girl, okay? So -17 is going to be smaller. Another term for smaller is less than. Okay, so we're going to write down that this is less than. -17 is less than -12. Okay, we have -5 compared to -10. Which one of those numbers is going to be further away from 0? -10. Okay, so that makes -10 the smaller number. So am I going to put a less than symbol here? No, because -5 is not less than -10. -5 is now greater than -10. So we're going to put a greater than symbol. Okay, back in I think it was 2nd and 3rd grade, they taught you guys inequalities, and they always said it's the gator mouth, right? The alligator mouth wants to eat the bigger number. So you always have your inequalities mouth opened up to the larger value. All right, -7 compared to -15. Which one of those is closer to 0? -7. -7 is closer to 0. So that means -7 is going to have the mouth opened up to it. So this is also a greater than symbol. Okay, so let's go ahead. I want you guys to take the time right now. You have 2 clusters of numbers. I want you to put them in order from least to greatest. Put the first set in order from least to greatest. Put the second set in order from least to greatest. If you need some help, you can look up here at your number line. The number line is written in order, so you can always use that as an assistance. Quickly. Okay, so for problem number 1, putting them in order from least to greatest, our smallest number is what, guys? -5. Okay, so we have -5 followed by -2. Okay, now we don't have any more negatives, so then we go on to what? 0, right? We have 0 up here, so we have to put the 0. Then we can put positives. What's our smallest positive number? The 3, and then the 7. Okay, so there's our order from least to greatest: -5, -2, 0, 3, and 7. For problem number 2, our smallest negative number is -4. Then we've got -2 followed by -1. We also have a 0 in this set. Then our positives, we have 1, 3, and 5. Notice I always cross off the numbers after I've used them, so I just make sure I've used every single number in this set. Okay, vocabulary. Vocabulary is really important when it comes to identifying positive terms and negative terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm going to list out examples of some negative terms, some negative vocabulary, and then you're going to tell me what you think the opposite word would be for positive. So the first word I'm going to tell you is if I say it's less. If I say something is less, what would be the positive version of that word? More. Good. More or greater. Either one of those would be perfectly fine. Okay, if I say something is smaller, what would be the positive version of smaller? Go ahead. Remember, shout it out. Opposite of smaller. Bigger, right? Remember, positive is going to be the opposite of that. So we've got bigger or larger. Okay. Below. Below can mean a negative value. What's the opposite term for below? Above. Okay. So below would be negative, above would be positive. If you are in debt, that means that you owe money. That's a negative thing. When we're in debt or we owe money to somebody, that's a negative. What would be the opposite of owing someone money? Owing means you have to pay them back, right? Yeah, kind of very similar. Receiving, another word for receiving is you're earning it, right? When you receive something, you earn something. So instead of owing money to somebody, you are earning money from somebody. Okay, if I take out a loan, that means I'm borrowing money from a bank. When I take out a loan, I borrow money from the bank. This one might be a little bit difficult. The opposite of taking a loan from a bank would be to make a savings with a bank. So you have a savings account. With a loan, you have to pay the bank money. With a savings account, the bank winds up paying you money. Called interest. Same thing with a bank. When I go to a bank and I want to take money out of my account, I have to do a withdrawal. So withdrawal would be a negative value. Does anybody know what the opposite of a withdrawal would be? When you put money back into the bank, it's called a what? Nobody? Starts with a D. Deposit. Deposit. There you go. Okay, so we either will withdraw money from the bank or we'll deposit money into the bank. Okay, when you're in a plane and the plane starts to land, it's called descend. When the plane starts to land, it's taking a descend. It's coming down. Anybody know what the opposite of descend is? Ascend. Good. When it climbs up, it's called ascend. All right, here's a nice easy one. Decrease. Opposite is increase. Good. The stock market. Stock market had a huge drop in the morning, but then in the evening, by the end of the day, it went back up, which is called a rise. Instead of dropping, you're going to rise. You're going to rise above. We're my football fans. We hate it when our team has a loss of yardage, right? We don't like it when it has a loss. But when it gains, when we gain yards, it makes us happy. All right, so those are our terms for negatives and positives. What I want you guys to do is, using these terms, go ahead and flip your paper over to the back. On the back, I have several different scenarios listed out. You're going to identify whether the scenario I'm telling you is a positive, a negative, or it might even be 0. It could be 0. So let's take a look. I'll put this back up here in just a second. But when we're taking a look at here, if I say I'm going to gain 6 pounds, gain of 6 pounds, is that a positive 6, a negative 6, or a 0? Positive. So you don't have to write positive. You could just put a plus sign and then the number 6. If it's a negative, you would put a negative sign and then the number. And if it's 0, you would just write out 0. Okay? I'm going to put those words right back up here again in case you need them. Go ahead and do problems 1 through 9 on your own. Problem number 2, it's a loss of 10 yards. Is that positive, negative, or 0? Negative. Negative. So we have negative 10. What about 1,000 meters above sea level? Positive. So we have positive 1,000. You owe $50. Negative. Negative 50. Ground level? 0. Okay, 17 below 0. Negative. Negative 17. Sea level? 0. Okay, depositing $142. Positive. So we put plus 142. And then descending 2,500 feet. Negative. So negative 2,500. Okay, so looking for those key words that let you know. Okay, so here are our key words. We had loss. We had owe. We had below. We had descending. Those were all negative words. We had gain, above, depositing. Those were all positive words. And then whenever it's something that's at the level, ground level, sea level, if it's right at a level, that's going to be our 0. All right. Absolute value is the last little conversation we're going to have real quickly. Absolute value, guys, is distance. We talked about it just a little bit ago about how far apart a number is from 0 on the number line. So distance is calculated by the term absolute value. So absolute value of a number is basically saying, hey, how far apart is 4 from 0? How far apart is 4 from 0? 4. Okay, it's 4 units away from 0. How far apart is negative 30 from 0? 30, right? Just 30. So absolute value of negative 30 is 30. How far away is negative 4 from 0? 4. Okay, so we have 4 units away from 0. So absolute value is just how far away is the number from 0. It's always, always going to be positive. Absolute value is always going to be positive. Now, sometimes you have absolute value within inside of a problem, or a problem inside of absolute value. Absolute value acts like it's parentheses. You always do your absolute value first, or whatever's inside of the absolute value first. Okay? So here we have absolute value of negative 3, and then we're going to subtract a 5. So we have to do this absolute value portion first. I have to take the absolute value of negative 3 before I can subtract the 5. What's the absolute value of negative 3? So how far away is negative 3 from 0? 3. So when I'm working that out, I'm just going to get a 3, but then I have to finish off the rest of the problem. The rest of this problem is going to come down as a minus 5. So now I've got a subtraction problem. I have 3 minus 5. 3 minus 5, is that going to give me a positive or a negative number? Negative, right? You're taking a small number and subtracting a larger number. You know that you're going to get a negative answer, and what's the difference going to be? Negative what? -2. Good. So we have -2 as our answer. Here for problem number 5, I have a negative absolute value of -15. Okay, so this negative is on the outside, and then I have an absolute value of -15 from the inside. So we're going to do the absolute value portion first. How far away is -15 from 0? 15. Okay, but I still have this little negative sign that's on the outside. So when I attach it to the end, that 15 now becomes -15. All right, problem 6. I have absolute value of 4 minus 7. 4 minus 7 is inside of the absolute value, and then outside of it I have a +9. So I have to do 4 minus 7 first before I can take the absolute value, and then I can add the 9. 4 minus 7. What's 4 minus 7?
3.
Not just 3. -3. Remember, we have a small number minus a larger number. That's going to give us a negative. So we have absolute value of -3 plus the 9. Well, I can't add the 9 yet because I still have to take the absolute value. What's the absolute value of -3? 3, right? Absolute value of -3 is 3. So then we get 3 plus 9. What's 3 plus 9? 12. So there's our final answer. Okay, so for today's assignment, you have 3 IXL skills that practice these different things. We have absolute value, we have some stuff that you're ordering numbers from least to greatest, or identifying the type of integer that it's going to be. They're very quick. My last class only had like 6 minutes to work on it, and most of them got through 2 skills. You have until Friday to get it done. You have until the end of the week to be able to get your assignments for the week done. Who can remind the class, though? What is the score you must obtain to have it completed? Well, just a 70. 70 means it's completed. If you go above a 70, you can get extra credit. But remember, I only take extra credit up to what score? An 80. 80 is the most that you can get. So any score that you get between a 70 and an 80 gets you extra credit. Go ahead and get logged into your computers.